The moment you realize your entire life work is being handed over to a man who does not even know the difference between a chemical compound and a cleaning fluid is the moment you stop playing nice. I watched Spencer Caldwell strut through the glass doors of our pharmaceutical lab like he owned the ground we walked on. He was the son-in-law of our chief executive officer, George Caldwell, sporting a tailored Navy suit that cost more than my annual mortgage, and he was entirely clueless about the reality of medicine. My name is Julian Thorne, and I had given nearly 28 years of my life to Apex Biolabs. When I started as a junior formulation chemist at 30, the facility was a small independent operation dedicated to creating custom medications for patients with rare conditions. We served children who needed precise liquid dosages and elderly folks whose bodies could not handle mass-produced pills. It was exhausting labor, but it was work that mattered deeply to the community. I spent my days calibrating scales, running autoclave sterilizations, and preparing custom formulations under laminar flow hoods. We were a small, dedicated team of 8 scientists, and we knew the history of every patient who walked through our doors. The physical space of the laboratory had been my second home for almost 3 decades. I knew the blue linoleum floors, the white sterile walls, the constant low hum of the clean room's air filtration systems, and the sharp, clean smell of 70% isopropyl alcohol. I knew which balance was slightly sensitive to drafts and which incubator had a temperature drift of 0.2 degrees. In custom compounding, accuracy is not a goal. It is a legal and moral obligation. When you are formulating a medication for a 6-year-old child with a rare metabolic disorder, a deviation of 0.1 milligrams is the difference between a therapeutic cure and systemic toxicity. We took pride in this accuracy. We were the silent guardians of a vulnerable population. Everything shifted 10 months ago when Spencer was appointed as the Chief Operating Officer, without a single job posting or interview. Spencer had married George Caldwell's daughter Evelyn after his luxury boutique hotel in Miami went bankrupt. To save his daughter from embarrassment and keep his son-in-law employed, George handed Spencer the operations of our highly specialized laboratory. Spencer replaced my longtime mentor, Dr. Beatrice Albright, who quietly packed her desk after 25 years of flawless service to the company. Spencer had a background in luxury hotel management, which meant he knew absolutely nothing about sterile environments, regulatory compliance, or the strict guidelines of the Food and Drug Administration. Yet there he was, standing in front of our highly specialized team of chemists and researchers, demanding that we pivot toward market dominance and maximize operational efficiency. During his very first staff meeting, Spencer presented a new production schedule that required a 40% increase in output within 6 months. Silas Finch, our senior lab technician who had been calibrating our equipment for 25 years, immediately raised his hand to voice a warning. He explained that our current clean room capacity could not handle that volume without serious cross-contamination risks. The sterilization cycles for our glassware required a minimum of 45 minutes at 121 degrees Celsius, and rushing the process would compromise sterile integrity. Spencer simply smiled, adjusted his gold watch, and told Silas that he needed to shed his limiting beliefs and adapt to modern synergy. Spencer looked around the room and remarked that in the hotel industry, they turned rooms over in 15 minutes, and a lab was just a room with different furniture. The scientists sat in stunned silence, realizing that our new leader could not tell a petri dish from a dinner plate. By late autumn, the situation inside the facility had become completely unsustainable. Spencer systematically dismantled our safety protocols, removing the rigorous pre-batch verification system that had protected our patients for over a decade. He dismissed these life-saving checks as administrative red tape that slowed down corporate growth. I sent multiple written warnings regarding the escalating dangers, but each memo was ignored by his new streamlined management team. I discovered the company had hired Colin Brooks, a former hotel colleague of Spencer, as a technical coordinator at a salary of $190,000, which was exactly double my salary of $95,000. Colin spent his days playing golf and writing empty corporate emails asking for status updates, while I worked 60 hours a week ensuring our chemical batches were safe. It was clear that my 28 years of loyalty meant nothing compared to corporate favoritism. The hammer finally dropped on a rainy Tuesday morning when I was summoned directly to the executive suite. Spencer sat behind a pristine mahogany desk that used to belong to Beatrice, backdropped by a glossy motivational poster about disruption. He did not ask me to sit down before handing me a thick manila envelope. He calmly explained that my role as principal chemist was being eliminated in a structural realignment. I looked at the paperwork, realizing he was dismissing 28 years of institutional knowledge without a single second thought. I had saved this laboratory from bankruptcy twice, worked through endless holidays, and trained every single technician downstairs. Spencer leaned back in his leather chair and told me that the company needed fresh, agile leadership, and my traditional methods were too slow for their new commercial expansion. Instead of losing my temper, I looked him dead in the eye and asked if he had reviewed the intellectual property clauses in my original contract. He offered a dismissive smirk and said human resources had handled everything and that all work performed in the building belonged to the corporation. I walked back to my station, packed my few personal belongings into a single cardboard box, and quietly left the building. My box contained a framed photograph of my wife Sarah, my old chemistry journals, and a retirement mug given to me by Beatrice. I chose not to weep or make a scene because showing vulnerability to people like Spencer only validates their cruelty. Silas Finch gave me a silent embrace near the exit, his eyes filled with genuine worry for the future of the laboratory. As I drove home in my 12-year-old sedan, a cold sense of clarity settled over me. Spencer believed he had cleared a minor line item from his budget spreadsheet. What he did not know was a crucial piece of history from my university days before I married. My quiet departure at 9:14 a.m. was not a defeat. It was the start of an inevitable countdown. I had left the building, but I still held the keys to their entire operation. Back in my honors year at Stanford, I invented a groundbreaking stability testing methodology for complex pharmaceutical compounds under my birth name, Julian Vance. I secured a private patent for this mathematical model, which allowed small labs to safely mix incompatible active ingredients. When I joined Apex Biolabs 28 years ago, the founding director discovered my patent and signed a formal licensing agreement. That original contract had been legally renewed every 7 years, but the current agreement was set to expire in exactly 2 months. Because I used my married name of Julian Thorne. Throughout my career, Spencer never connected the dots between his fired chemist and the owner of their core technology. My wife, Sarah Thorne, and I had decided 29 years ago to use her family name to honor her father, a legendary chemistry professor who had mentored me. He had no sons to carry on his academic legacy, and taking her name was our way of preserving his contribution to science. The invention itself was the result of 3 years of intense graduate research. I remember the endless nights in the Stanford physical chemistry basement, surrounded by heat sensors and liquid chromatographs. I had spent countless hours with my advisor, plotting the thermodynamic stability curves of multi-component suspensions. Sarah was a graduate student in molecular biology back then. We met in the campus library, and she was struggling with stability issues in her cell culture suspensions. Her frustration inspired me to develop a mathematical formula that could predict these degradation curves. It utilized a series of complex differential equations to predict the degradation rates of liquid compounds when exposed to slight temperature variations. In the pharmaceutical industry, this was a massive breakthrough because it eliminated the need for weeks of real-time stability testing. Small batch compounders could use my mathematical model to verify the safety of a mixture within minutes. The patent, officially registered under the name Julian Vance, was my personal property. I had never assigned the patent to Apex Biolabs. I had only licensed it. The license agreement had a strict clause. Upon expiration or termination of the license, Apex Biolabs was legally required to purge the methodology from their proprietary testing software and cease all utilization of the algorithms. When we signed the original license 28 years ago, the founding director and I spent 3 days negotiating the terms in a small office filled with paper files. I was young, but I knew the value of my creation, and I insisted that the patent remain mine. George Caldwell, who was then a junior executive under the founder, had watched the signing with quiet envy. He had always wanted the company to own the intellectual property outright, but he lacked the leverage to demand it. When George became CEO, he forgot the terms of that original struggle, assuming that after almost 3 decades, the technology had somehow dissolved into the company's assets. This proprietary methodology was deeply woven into their daily testing software, their manufacturing guidelines, and their official state medical licenses. Without it, their entire production line would legally grind to a halt. Instead of rushing to seek immediate vengeance, I went home, brewed a pot of chamomile tea, and sat with Sarah at our kitchen table. I told her what had happened at the office. She did not panic. She simply smiled and reminded me that the patent was mine, not theirs. She had seen me work until 3 a.m. for years, building that technology, and she knew the strength of our position. That evening, I contacted my long-term attorney, Frederick Cole. We met in his quiet wood-paneled office downtown, where the dust motes danced in the afternoon light. Frederick had represented my intellectual property interests for 15 years, and he immediately saw the massive leverage we held. We carefully reviewed the active patent documentation and drafted a formal notice of non-renewal to send to the corporate legal department. I made sure the letter stated that any continued utilization of the advanced stability protocols after December 31st would result in immediate federal litigation for patent infringement under 35 U.S.C. Section 271. While Spencer was busy playing corporate strategist, he also decided to lay off 12 more senior lab scientists, all aged 50 and older, to further cut expenses. He did this overnight, effective immediately, without giving them the 60-day notice required by the Federal Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, also known as the Warren Act under 29 U.S.C. Section 2101. Spencer believed he was a financial genius, but he was actually stacking dynamite under the company's foundations. The corporate reaction was swift and chaotic when my attorney's legal notice landed on the desk of the chief executive officer, George Caldwell. Silas Finch texted me later that week, indicating that the upper management was in a state of absolute frenzy searching for my contact details. Their new technical director from the city, Dr. Nicholas Foster, had informed them that removing my methodology would require years of testing and complete regulatory reapproval. Spencer had corporate confidence, but he lacked basic competence. He had built his entire career on slides and buzzwords, never realizing that the actual physical world does not conform to administrative directives. The bank that provided their $25 million operating line of credit also caught wind of the safety protocol changes and the sudden mass layoffs. Jillian Parker, the bank's chief risk officer, launched an immediate audit, placing the credit line on high priority watch. If Apex Biolabs could not verify their compliance systems and resolve the pending labor disputes, the bank would freeze their funds, which would mean immediate operational shutdown. The walls were closing in, and Spencer was still trying to figure out which spreadsheet cell to optimize next. He was completely blind to the fact that his actions had triggered a massive corporate crisis that could not be resolved by hiring another marketing consultant. He did not know that our attorney had already sent a copy of the non-renewal notice directly to the bank's legal department, confirming that the laboratory would lose its operational software license on December 31st. The credit line audit was no longer a routine check. It was an emergency protocol. As the panic intensified at the corporate headquarters, Spencer realized he had made a catastrophic error. Instead of admitting his mistake, he chose a path that would seal his legal fate. In mid-December, Spencer accessed the archived employment files from 28 years ago and found a blank, unsigned intellectual property assignment form. Believing he could save himself, Spencer used a digital editing program to forge my signature on the document, backdating it to my hire date. He logged into the corporate network at 2 a.m. from his home office, sweating in the dark as he cut and pasted a scan of my physical signature from an old paper application onto the digital PDF file. The forged document claimed that Julian Vance had assigned all patent rights to Apex Biolabs for a nominal payment of $1. Spencer presented this document to George Caldwell and the legal department, claiming the non-renewal notice was invalid because the company owned the patent outright. Under California Penal Code Section 470, this act constituted criminal forgery. Spencer sat in his darkened study that night, typing rapidly, convinced that he was the smartest person in the room. He believed that Julian Thorne was just a legacy chemist who had long ago forgotten the details of his youth, and that a forged signature on an old PDF would pass without inspection. It is a standard document. Spencer had whispered to himself as the loading bar reached 100%. Nobody will check the audit logs of a 28-year-old file. His arrogance was so absolute that he did not even realize the document management system was running on a secure cloud network with unchangeable transaction records. Spencer did not understand that the company's document management system maintained immutable cryptographic logs. Every upload, download, and modification was recorded with a precise timestamp and IP address. When corporate counsel Brenda Stone reviewed the file, she noticed that the document had been uploaded and digitally signed on a Wednesday afternoon, 4 days after I was fired, from an IP address originating from Spencer's personal office. Brenda was an experienced attorney, and she immediately ran the PDF through a metadata reader, discovering the digital signature had been created using a modern software version that did not even exist 28 years ago. Brenda realized the document was void ab initio, invalid from the very beginning due to the clear evidence of fraud and forgery. Furthermore, she knew that using a forged document in a legal dispute would expose the company to severe criminal liabilities and treble damages in a federal court. When Brenda Stone confronted George Caldwell in his private office, she laid the forensic metadata report on his desk. "This is not a real document, George," she had said, her voice flat and serious. "Spencer generated this file last week. The cryptographic audit logs from our document management system show his IP address and admin credentials modifying the PDF. If we present this document to Julian Vance Thorne's attorney, we will be committing fraud on a federal court, and Spencer could face state prison time." George sat in silence, the weight of the realization pressing down on him. His son-in-law had committed a felony to cover up his gross negligence. Silas Finch kept me updated on the internal chaos. His text messages arrived daily, detailed and urgent. "Julian, you won't believe it. Spencer brought in a forged document. The legal team is panicking. Foster refused to sign the production sheets. The whole floor is in revolt. Silas told me that Dr. Nicholas Foster had refused to sign off on the monthly production reports, stating that the testing software was running on unlicensed code. Foster was a real scientist who understood the legal ramifications of patent infringement under 35 U.S.C. Section 271. He had walked directly into George's office and placed his credentials on the line. "I will not participate in the unlicensed manufacture of pharmaceuticals," Foster had declared. "If we continue production after December 31st without a license from Julian Vance, we are committing willful patent infringement, which carries statutory damages up to $150,000 per violation. I will resign before I sign these reports." The board of directors convened an emergency session to address the looming crisis. The company's legal liability was staggering. Not only were they facing a patent infringement suit, but the 12 laid-off scientists had filed a class-action lawsuit for violations of the Warren Act under 29 U.S.C. Section 2101. The bank had also threatened to declare a default on the $25,000 zeros in credit line if the legal disputes were not resolved before the end of the year. Spencer's actions represented a massive breach of fiduciary duty, exposing the board members to personal liability for corporate waste and gross negligence. Under the standard established in the corporate Caremark decision, directors and officers have an active duty to ensure that adequate compliance reporting systems exist. By allowing Spencer to dismantle safety systems and forge documents, the board had breached their duties. The board immediately suspended Spencer's operational authority, barring him from entering the premises while they prepared a remediation plan. Spencer's desk was locked, and security was instructed to deny him access to the laboratory floor. In early January, my attorney Frederick Cole and I sat across a polished boardroom table from George Caldwell and Brenda Stone. Spencer Caldwell was visibly absent from the room. having been barred from the proceedings entirely. The executives looked completely defeated because they realized they had absolutely no leverage left. Brenda Stone placed the backdated assignment agreement on the table, trying to see if we would compromise. Frederick Cole immediately produced the cryptographic audit logs we had obtained, showing the exact timestamp of Spencer's digital modification. My attorney calmly pointed out that the document was void ab initio and that any attempt to use it would lead to immediate criminal charges for forgery under California Penal Code Section 470. The atmosphere in the room was tense, the rain clattering against the large glass windows of the 14th floor conference room. George Caldwell sat with his head in his hands, looking every bit of his 70 years. He was a man who had built a successful business, only to watch his son-in-law tear it down in less than a year. Brenda Stone looked at my attorney's documentation and then looked at George, giving a slow, defeated shake of her head. There was no defense. The evidence of Spencer's forgery was absolute, and any attempt to present the document in court would destroy the company's credibility and land Spencer in state prison. Brenda looked across the table at us. "What are your terms, Julian?" "We want to resolve this quickly and quietly," she said. George Caldwell had called his daughter Evelyn just hours before the meeting, tears in his eyes as he explained that Spencer's actions had put the family business on the brink of collapse. Evelyn had been shocked, but she knew Spencer's history of cutting corners and shifting blame. She told her father to do whatever was necessary to save the laboratory, even if it meant exposing Spencer to the full consequences of his actions. The family loyalty that had protected Spencer for 10 months had evaporated in the face of criminal forgery. I looked George Caldwell in the eye and explained the reality of the situation. "Your son-in-law wanted to streamline operations," I said, "but he succeeded only in dismantling the legal and technical foundation of your business. If we file our federal lawsuit for patent infringement under 35 U.S.C. Section 271, the court will issue an immediate injunction. Your production line will stop, your bank will freeze your credit, and Apex Biolabs will be in bankruptcy within 30 days. This isn't just about a patent, it is about the patients. For 28 years, I ensured that every batch we released was safe. Spencer treated safety as a cost and treated my loyalty as an expense. He had warning signs about his business failures in Miami, and yet you brought him here and allowed him to treat our scientists like hotel clerks." I laid out my conditions, which were entirely non-negotiable. First, Apex Biolabs must immediately reinstate the 12 senior scientists who were laid off in violation of the Warren Act under 29 U.S.C. Section 2101. They must receive full back pay, benefits, and their original seniority status. Second, the company must fully restore the pre-batch verification safety protocols and allow Dr. Nicholas Foster to oversee all compliance standards. Third, Spencer Caldwell must be immediately terminated for cause, with his resignation made public, and the company must waive any corporate indemnification for his fraudulent actions. This meant Spencer would be personally liable for any legal actions and could not use company funds for his defense. Finally, I demanded a new patent licensing agreement. The royalty fee would be $350,000 per year, paid in advance with a 5-year contract term. Additionally, Apex Biolabs would pay $150 Silson settlement fee to cover the unauthorized usage of the patent during the dispute. George Caldwell tried to negotiate, asking if we could reduce the royalty fee. Frederick Cole stood up and began packing his files. "We are not negotiating. Julian Vance Thorne, the owner of the patent, has given you 28 years of service. You valued him at $95,000 while paying a hotel manager's friend double. Now you will pay the true market value of the technology that keeps you in business." George Caldwell raised his hand, signaling Frederick to sit down. "We accept the terms," he said. He signed the settlement agreement, realizing his arrogance had cost the company millions. The resolution was finalized within 48 hours. Spencer Caldwell was terminated for cause, and the board filed a civil lawsuit against him for breach of fiduciary duty to recover the financial damages. His career in the pharmaceutical and management industries was completely ruined, his name associated with fraud and corporate disaster. The 12 senior scientists, including Silas Finch, returned to their stations the following Monday. They welcomed the restoration of the safety protocols, which ensured that patients would receive safe, custom-compounded medications without risk of contamination. Silas and the team held a small, quiet celebration in the break room, with coffee and donuts, raising a cup to the victory of science over corporate incompetence. Silas called me that evening, his voice trembling with emotion. "Julian, the lab is ours again," he said. "The airlocks are clean, the sterilizers are running at full cycle, and the safety logs are being verified by Dr. Foster. We can look our patients in the eye again. The new database system is twice as secure as before." I received the $150, zeros in settlement, and the first year's licensing payment of $350,000. I chose not to return to Apex Biolabs as an employee. Instead, I established my own independent consulting firm, Vance Chemical Consulting. Sarah helped me manage the administrative side of the business, setting up our office in a spacious room overlooking our backyard garden. Today, I am 58 years old, and my patent for the stability testing methodologies is licensed to 12 different manufacturing facilities across the country. I regularly consult for these labs, ensuring that high standards of safety and compliance are maintained for every patient. I recently received a handwritten letter from a mother whose child relies on our custom compound to survive. The letter read, "Dear Dr. Thorne, thank you for standing up for the safety of these medications. Because of your dedication, my 8-year-old daughter, Lucy, has access to the precise formulation she needs to manage her condition. She is thriving, running in the park with her friends and attending school, things that were impossible just a year ago. She is playing soccer now, and her doctor says her metabolic markers are completely stable. Our family is forever grateful. Knowing that little girl is thriving matters far more than any corporate title or corner office plaque. When people underestimate your worth, they are actually handing you a powerful advantage because they never see the retaliation coming." Spencer looked at me and saw an old line item that he could easily eliminate to maximize his profits. His absolute certainty in his own superiority is exactly what caused his downfall. "My name is Julian Vance Thorne, and I learned that some legacies are written in stone, while arrogant men are just passing through. The systems we build survive their ignorance, and the law protects those who take the time to document the truth. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you are my old boss, then you are on your own. This entire experience taught me that true power in any industry does not lie with those who wear the suits and speak the buzzwords. It lies with the builders, the creators, and the people who understand the details. When a company forgets this truth, they begin to decay from the inside out. They replace substance with style and competence with connections. But when the systems fail, the slides will not save them, and the spreadsheets will not fix the code. I am glad I stood my ground, and I am glad the 12 scientists got their jobs back. We proved that the people who do the work are the ones who hold the ultimate leverage. I look forward to the next phase of my career, consulting on my own terms and helping other laboratories maintain the highest standards of safety for the patients who depend on them. The legal frameworks of our society are designed to prevent the exploitation of personal innovation, but they only work if you are willing to stand up and enforce them. Many scientists and engineers are content to let corporations take their creations because they fear the conflict. But I learned that when you have the law and the facts on your side, you do not need to fear anyone, no matter how much money or family connections they have. The Vance stability protocols remain my property, and they are now helping laboratories across the country create safer, more effective medications. That is a legacy I can be proud of, and it is a legacy that Spencer Caldwell could never buy, steal, or destroy. When you build the foundation, you own the building, and it is time for corporate leaders to remember that. Next time, read the contract and value your people before you find out how much it costs to replace them.